everybody, to Cumbria Wildlife Trust podcast. And I can't believe we are just coming up to our year-long anniversary. So this is our 12th episode. Who'd have thought, the one that we have a podcast, never mind, we'd get to 12 episodes. And this month, we're going to talk about beautiful grasslands, species-rich grasslands, and pollinators. With me, I've got Tanya St Pierre, who is our Grassland and Pollinator team manager.
Hello, nice to speak to you this afternoon.
Yeah, and we're recording the podcast at Bowber Farm. Bowber is one of our nature reserves, and it's one of the best examples of species-rich northern hay meadow still left in Cumbria. It's absolutely superb. I came here over 30 years ago because these are famous meadows. I think it's a bit of a funny one, the fact that they are so famous, and I think that reflects their rarity.
Yeah, absolutely. Obviously, they've been managed over time. These are really ancient meadows, probably passed down over the centuries, potentially right back. And these being ancient hay meadows in their own right are so important because they can support a rich diversity of species. And that's what we've got here today. And it's absolutely fantastic.
So, Tanya, tell us about where we are and what we can see.
Okay, so we are looking across a field. It's probably about 3 to 5 acres potentially. It's surrounded by dry stone walls, and we've got a barn to our left, and it's a really idyllic setting. You can see floating above a really beautiful yellow meadow. We've got great burnet just standing proud above the grasses, and you've got a whole array of grasses. I'd say probably about 15 different grasses here that make up the sward. I can see reds, I see greens, I can see sorrel sticking up. Right over in the corner, we can see big frothy heads of different plants as well. Right down low, you've got your white clover, and then you've got your buttercups that are shining golden. And in amongst that, we will have other species emerging. We've got meadowsweet, and we've got knapweed coming, so that bright purple head. And that just creates a huge variety of nectar and pollen for our pollinators, which is really important.
Brill. Yeah. We got an email earlier in the year from Jackie Bell. She's the only person who's actually been in touch with an idea for what we should cover in the podcast. She wanted us to cover the kind of biodiversity loss within the wider countryside. And we were thinking that this would be a great opportunity because grasslands are so prevalent in our landscape. They're everywhere. But the species-rich ones are down to such a tiny amount, aren't they? What's the percentage?
It's 3%, so we've lost 97% of our hay meadows over the last 100 years. And we talked about northern upland hay meadows. We've literally got only 1% left of those across the UK. And what we're talking about in Cumbria is about 500 hectares. So they are so rare. They are one of our rarest grasslands that we have.
And so we thought it would be an opportune episode to try to cover some of Jackie's points. And we might go back to some of Jackie's points in episodes to come as well as we cover different habitats. One of the things I was thinking about species-rich grasslands and the species that are within them is that we have a problem with the way we record. We record the species by squares, whether it's a kilometre square or a tetrad, and then that fills in the atlas. And it looks like we are endowed with lots of great species because such a species will appear in all these different squares. Where that is, is it just one plant that's been found on one verge? Because the verges between these meadows are normally more species rich than the meadows themselves, aren't they?
That's correct. They're usually the relics where the grasslands over the other side of the wall might have been intensified as a result of agriculture. But on the roadside verge, obviously they might have been left untouched, and this is where we have that rich array, what we call relic, of a suite of different hay meadow species, like our melancholy thistle. That's a really beautiful thistle that's out right now. And we might get even things like globeflower that you virtually don't see in meadows anymore. So they're hanging on by threads. But these are recorded, and if you look at our atlas, it looks fantastic. But what that doesn't take in is the abundance.
Species-rich hay meadows. Here we are at Bowber, surrounded by these beautiful flower-rich meadows. And the thing is, especially after the Second World War, farmers and land managers were incentivised to put fertiliser onto their land, to reseed, and we've basically lost most of the species from most of the countryside. Even if they are relics on those roadside verges, they're lost from most of the areas between those roadside verges. And the roadside verges are great, are they not, at giving us an indication of what we ought to try to restore. over the other side of the wall.
Very much so. And as I say, you'll have these little pockets. You might get wood cranesbill this time of year, which is really beautiful to see. Really nice purple plant. And you might get meadow cranesbill as well in our verges. But even here, we are seeing a decline in species. And we work very closely with organisations like National Highways to look at what can be done to help to increase wildflowers on these verges through projects like Get Cumbria Buzzing, for example. We've looked at how local authorities and Highways England cut and collect on the verges. So they need the removal of any cuttings, and that helps to increase the diversity on those verges. So that it's very important. In the past, those verges historically would have been grazed as well. So once upon a time, you might have a farmer just moving his sheep or cattle, and they would have grazed it, and that would have been quite an important part of the grazing regime potentially. But of course, those traditions have been lost, and it's different now. But to keep those species in the verges, at the moment, there's fantastic displays of orchid that people can see around, and even greater butterfly orchid that we can look to see coming up soon, which is really fantastic on our verges. But that also takes the right management too.
Brill. So, Tanya, you head up our Grassland and Pollinator team, don't you? That's just such a brilliant thing to have. And you've told us a bit about the Pollinator Project and the roadside verges. Tell us a bit more about what your team is doing to try to address this massive loss of species-rich grassland that we've seen.
We have helped farmers and other organisations restore about 500 hectares of grassland. So trying to put back that species richness, working very closely with farmers on their land, helping to provide the actual mechanism of adding seed and restoring grassland. So looking at what can be done, looking at the soils, all the way through to the actual delivery of grassland restoration, be it by green hay, be it by seed addition, or whether that's planting plugs and things like that. Yeah. We're currently working on 10 projects at the moment. So that includes 5 grassland projects and 5 pollination projects. We're working very closely with local communities. So we're funded through local authorities to work in the heart of our towns like Kendal and on the west coast, Workington, Whitehaven, to connect people with nature so they can understand and get those first-hand experiences with wildlife and understand the importance of grasslands as well. That, for example, a sward of grass will support our butterfly species, and they are the food plant of our butterflies. And these species need to be native to help to support our wildlife. And then we're working with organisations such as the National Park, the National Trust, Natural England, RSPB, and we're all working on different projects for the same end result for species-rich grassland across Cumbria.
And it's not necessarily that easy, is it? Because if the soil composition has been heavily altered, some of these fields, we're never really going to see massive changes in terms of adding species-rich grassland back into them.
It's really sad that when you look at soils, they're so complex. What our wildflowers need is very low fertility. So if you've got a field where you've had artificial fertiliser added, so you're raising those levels of nitrogen, potassium and phosphate, then that means that the grasses take over and they outcompete our wildflowers. So instantly you're going to really struggle with any nutrient-rich field to try and turn it round into a species-rich grassland. So it can be done, but it takes a long, long time. And remember, these meadows here, like we said before, they've been here for centuries. They could even go right back, passed on through generation after generation, starting back right from the Bronze Age when man first farmed.
And it's just that continuity of management that's actually meant that these meadows at Bowber Head are still here and are still as lovely as they are.
And it's down to the farmers that have kept them like that, you know, Absolutely. And that hard work.
Anyway, Liz has been out talking to people on the ground once again, and she's been talking to Shannon. Shannon works for Tanya in our grassland team, and she's one of the people who's putting this into practice, who's going out, surveying grasslands and talking to landowners and making this grassland restoration happen.
My name's Shannon Horrocks. I work for Cumbria Wildlife Trust as one of the grassland conservation officers as part of the Grassland and Pollinator team.
So can you describe where we are?
Yeah, so I'm actually at a National Trust-owned site today called Stonethwaite Farm, and it's in the Lake District in the South Lakes near Troutbeck. Just on the way up to Troutbeck Tongue, there's a couple of meadows alongside the track, and I'm out surveying those today.
And it looks absolutely stunning.
Yeah, it does, doesn't it? We've got all the mountains in the background over the Troutbeck Tongue there and up to Kirkstone Pass. It's gorgeous.
And then the fields themselves are looking glorious, aren't they?
Yeah, they've just started to bounce up now that we've had that flush of rain. So yeah, the grass is growing and getting quite long now. So it's perfect time for surveying.
So Shannon, can you tell me exactly what you're doing here then?
Yeah, so I'm currently working on a project called the Cumbria Seed Bank Project, and before I can get going on any kind of restoration or enhancement work, we have to go out and assess the sites that we're potentially going to restore. So I'm currently looking at these fields as potential to revisit at a later point to plug plant. So I'm out today basically recording botanical diversity and taking soil samples which will be sent off to laboratories for testing, so I can get an idea of the pH, phosphorus, magnesium levels, sort of thing. I'm just getting a general overview today of what the sward already looks like and maybe what we might want to put into the sward to further diversify it.
Okay, so what kind of things have you been finding here?
So these meadows are actually really lovely already because I think they have already been restored previously. So I've been finding just your typical meadow species such as your meadow buttercup, your red clover, sweet vernal and yellow rattle. Yellow rattle is a really important one. But I've been finding other lovely species such as I found some greater burnet, some knapweed, some bistor, hawkspits, lots of things really, but it's very lovely out here, yeah.
So what's the sort of mechanics of it then? Do you take a sample square?
Yep, I basically measure out a metre squared and I record everything that I find in the metre squared, basically whether it's present or absent. So I record all the grasses and all the wildflowers and sedges and things like that I find in the metre squared. And I do that at 10 random points across the field. I basically walk in sort of a W shape across the field and just randomly count a few steps between each stop.
Shannon, you mentioned taking soil samples. Why is that important?
So the soil testing allows us to figure out whether we're working on sort of like acid-based soils or neutral or calcareous-based. And then it gives us an indication as to what we should be planting in that sward, because there's no point in us putting some rarer calcareous loving species in to an acid loving site.
Absolute waste of time. Yeah. It's always a bit baffling really that wildflowers really like poor soil rather than rich soil, don't they?
Yeah, when we also do the soil testing, we're not only looking at pH, but we're looking at the phosphorus levels and like the magnesium levels and potassium levels. And it tends to be the good quality diverse hay meadows are really low in all those nutrients because, well, fields that have high nutrients, you tend to get lots of things like broadleaf dock and nettles and things like that starting to take over, and they start out competing our rarer or littler species. And so that's why we typically, when we're looking at grasslands to restore, we look for those with low nutrient levels, because those are going to be the ones that will allow us to get those wildflowers into the sward.
So the information that you're gleaning today will be put into practice later in the year then? You'll then have a sort of recipe for what you plant and where?
Yeah, exactly that. That's just because I really do need to kind of see the sward myself to think, oh, it is going to be suitable for restoration, and where could we put the plants in, and what plants do I want to put in, and I kind of need to paint that picture myself in my own head. And yeah, it kind of all feeds into the restoration work that we do at a later point, and you can only really capture that by going out and just seeing it in the field and looking at the botanical diversity and just painting that overall picture.
It's absolutely stunning to look at, but that's not the point, is it?
No, as gorgeous as they are actually providing a function. We're doing all this to sort of create more habitat for our pollinators, and it's just essential for feeding, for the pollen and the nectar that they collect. And the more diverse the sward is, the more wildlife it's going to support. Just today, I think I've seen a handful of different species of bees alone, and I've not been out to many sites yet this year, but out of all the sites I've been to so far, this is the most wildlife I've seen in one meadow.
Is now the busiest time of year for you, with the meadows just coming into flower?
Yeah, this tends to be the better time of year for us to go out when things are starting to come into flower. You can be a bit more confident about what you're IDing, and it's a lot quicker. So yeah, we tend to be out in the field all of June June and July, sometimes the end of May as well.
And this work's taking place on other people's land, isn't it? This isn't the Cumbria Wildlife Trust reserves, is it?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, we work with a whole host of different people. So today, as I said, I'm out on a National Trust site today. There's a farmer tenant in the site, and I think he has been for the past 36 years, he told me. I think his son's going to take over. But we work with lots of different private landowners, farmers, smallholders, partner organisations. Yeah, lots of different people. United Utilities, National Trust, RSPB, yeah, all sorts of different landowners. And it's great. I get to explore the whole county doing that, and I wouldn't get to see these places otherwise, and they're just absolutely fantastic.
And is part of your role then trying to get the cooperation of other landowners?
Yeah, it is. Yeah, it can be quite tricky because we do often work with farmers. You sort of got to remember, although it's fantastic work that we're doing and it's really important work, they've also got to make a living out of this and their land. So it's kind of finding that ideal balance where we can support each other. I absolutely do want to restore as many wildflower meadows as I can, but I've also got to be realistic about what the landowner can manage and what they're going to get out of it profit-wise to keep their business going. So yeah, it can be really tricky sort of finding that middle ground and trying to convince them not to cut so early in July and to shut up their fields a little bit earlier in spring, because the earlier you shut up in spring, the more like early flowering species you're going to get. It allows them to develop and drop their seed. If I was restoring this site, as gorgeous as it is, there's a couple of rarer species that maybe we could try and plant out at this site because it's already really lovely and it could support those rarer species that we don't have as much of.
What were you thinking of?
So I was thinking, I've been walking up and down the verges here and I've spotted things like wood cranesbill, bistorte. I thought I spotted some melancholy thistle, but I could be making that up. I was driving past that, so some really nice species. Like they're just not around as much, and it'd be lovely to plant more of that into the field. But some of those species prefer less disturbance, or they need earlier shut up dates. So rather than, because this farmer doesn't shut up until about early to mid-May, so if we could get him to shut up slightly earlier, maybe at the end of April, it might just help those like early flowering species like the wood cranesbill and things like that.
And by shutting up you mean keeping the sheep off?
Yeah, closing the gates to stop the sheep going in. And then we ask them as well to try and cut later in the year, just to allow those later flowering species the time to set seed before the grass is being cut. I think standard cutting time for most people is around mid-July, but if we can get them to cut later July, start of August, it's a bit more ideal. So it's definitely tricky for them, and obviously in us asking that of the farmers, it means that they've not got any grazing for their livestock. So yeah, it can be really tricky trying to get them to meet those requirements for certain species. So unless the landowners are able to sort of meet those management requirements, I probably wouldn't plant the rarer species in, just because it probably would be pointless and a waste of our efforts and the money and the time that's gone into growing those plants. So yeah, we can be quite particular, I think. We sound picky, but we're just really trying to give these rarer species the best chance possible, basically.
Absolutely, getting the best value from them.
Yeah, definitely.
And these are generally plants that we've brought on ourselves, aren't they?
Yeah, we've got a fantastic nursery up at Grasslands Cyc that Adam McGinley runs, and horticultural manager. He's growing all of our species for the project that I'm currently working on. So it's a total of 40,000 plants that he's going to be growing for us. They're not the common plants that are easier to grow either. They're quite tricky species, these ones, so he's got his work cut out for him. But yeah, they're all coming from our nursery, and it's all locally collected seed and locally grown. So we just, again, trying to give the plants the best possible chance of surviving once they've been planted out, because they're adapted to our Cumbrian climate and conditions. So yeah.
We're just heading away from the meadow now, and we're just passing some wonderful verges here, aren't we?
Yes. The verges are often unmanaged. Sometimes it does end up with less desirable species like your nettles and things like that, but you do get some absolute gems in the verges, especially down here. I've been seeing some wood cranesbill, which is one of the species on the seed bank project that we're wanting to plant into fields. So it's nice seeing that it already exists here and that it can survive, sort of thing.
So if it can survive on one side of the stone wall, it could certainly survive on the other.
Exactly, maybe just a slight change in management, but yeah, exactly that. So I've got some meadow sweet here, and again, this one's one that we do plant out quite a bit into sites, especially wetter meadows, because it often does do well in wet sections of the grasslands that we work in, but they do well on slopes and verges and things like that as well. I think it's quite easy to identify because it's sort of got that red stem there.
Oh yeah.
The sort of like opposite leaves, they're identical, like if you split it down the middle, it's the same on either side, and they've got that 3-lobed terminal leaf, quite pointy leaves as well, so that's quite a nice one that we plant. If we walk back that way, there was some meadow cranesbill.
Have you got a favourite?
I do, yeah. It's not really like a very rare one, but it's less commonly seen. Great Bonnet. They just have these awesome crimson red, like lollipop heads almost. They're just like these little balls and they wave around. But I think it's just the colour. They're just so deeply red. I love it. And I've read that you can make Cumbrian wine out of them. I've never tried it. But yeah, they're probably my favourite. They just flutter about in the wind.
Yeah.
And then possibly Ragged Robin, which I don't see loads of either. But I love it. It's quite kind of a bit messy, but I really, really like it as well. Love the purple on it, the pinky purple.
Yeah.
So here is some of the meadow cranesbill that I was talking about. There's a meadow cranesbill and a wood cranesbill, and the one we've got here is the wood cranesbill. And the way I'd describe the difference is if you look at the leaves side by side on the meadow cranesbill and the wood cranesbill, these wood cranesbill leaves are really quite thick.
They do feel quite furry, don't they?
They do, yeah. They've got lots of little hairs on the tops of the leaves, and they're quite big and palmate.
Yeah.
So yeah, the best way to tell the difference is by looking at the leaves. And then also the colour of the flower tends to be slightly different. So the wood cranesbill tends to be more like a pinky purpley, whereas the meadow cranesbill looks more of like a pale bluey purpley colour.
Yeah.
But this is the wood anyway, the wood cranesbill.
Yeah. So it'd be fantastic to get them back into the meadows, wouldn't it?
Yeah, they're literally just on the wrong side, aren't they? Well, you'd want them on both sides, basically.
Yeah.
If they can survive on this side, they should be able to be surviving on the opposite side too.
Absolutely.
I hate to think how many plug plants poor Shannon must plant in an autumn. I feel sorry for her. I see her coming back into the office bedraggled from the wet every day, and she's been out at the coalface.
Yeah, and it's fantastic because you see the success. Just yesterday, one of our other grassland conservation officers, Kath, went out to see a site where Shannon actually had plug plant last year. Lo and behold, Kath went back and there were 5 wood cranesbill all in a circle. So we know that we've had success and they've come back. And yes, she's a fantastic trooper, Shannon. Thousands and thousands of plug plants. So take my hat off to her.
Yeah. Here at Bowber Head, the green hay was taken from here to do the restoration of our meadows at Icot Hill. And that was one of the most phenomenally successful hay meadow restoration projects I've ever seen, because sometimes it takes quite a while. And depending on how the soil is, the plants don't all take first time. And sometimes they have a great flush, don't they? And then they start to disappear again. But at Icot, it's been an incredible transformation, hasn't it?
Absolutely. I was literally there last week and we can see a melancholy thistle coming throughout the sward. We've got pignut, a lovely, beautiful, really old species has appeared. It's fantastic to see these species coming out.
I think we have to stress, don't we, that it takes even that great success at Icot, it's still going to take years until they become as species rich as these old and ancient meadows here.
Absolutely. 10, 15 years to even get it started to be species rich. You know, we're looking at 16 species per metre squared when you're getting towards species richness, but a really species rich meadow, you're looking at 30 species per metre squared and 120 different plant species across the whole meadow.
Yeah. Tell us a little bit then about the Cumbria Seed Bank project and what we're doing with that one.
Right, it's an absolutely fantastic project. It's funded through Heritage Lottery Fund, a really brilliant £270,000 project. And that's really vital for us to do work on the ground. It's looking at our rare species in Cumbria. So a lot of our once common species are disappearing from our meadows, and these include some of the ones we've spoken about, and even some rarer ones like Dyer's greenweed, which most people probably wouldn't have heard of, but going back a century or more, people would have used this for dyeing different clothes, and a very important plant. And it just grows in sort of niche places, but it used to be in our meadows. So we're trying to put back these quite rare species. So spignal, which is another unusual one, sawwort, species that people wouldn't have probably even heard of, but they were once common or less rare in our meadows.
So there's a kind of suite of species that it's quite easy to get established so that you've got a flower-rich sward. But some of these rarer species, some of these more difficult species, we're going back and we're bolstering the populations, aren't we, by trying to get them back into these grasslands?
Absolutely. So we're looking at why they might have declined in places, but then where we know that they will be successful, mostly through the correct management, working alongside landowners and farmers, we'll put these species back. And how we're growing these is very exciting as well, because up in our northern offices at Gosling site, we're growing those species in our Cumbria seed bank.
Yeah, we've talked to Adam and his fantastic volunteers in a previous podcast. And I think Shannon mentioned in her interview as well, how we're growing all of these plants, all the plugs that we're putting in. We're collecting lots of seed. But it's a brilliant way of us ploughing our own resources back into these projects, growing all our own plants, collecting all our own seed. We talked about grasslands missing within most of the countryside. And every little helps, doesn't it? No matter how small, people can make a difference. And there's a big move to this, all this no-mow May, and lots of people turning small parts of their gardens into species-rich, flower-rich grassland as well.
Absolutely. As you say, every single garden counts. Every square metre counts, because you will have food plants for our native butterflies. If you've even left a square metre of your garden to grow and just left it and didn't add anything to it, that would be hugely beneficial. But of course, once you start adding some of our wild plants, so yellow rattlewort is a really good one to get started, and that helps to create a more open sward. But what I would say, please look at native plants and see if you can find local provenance plants. So seed that's come from Cumbria, so look where you purchase your seed from, because that makes a big difference as well. But just a square metre, or as I say, just let grass grow simply. And by not cutting it, as Joe says, in May, June, July, you can cut it after that. But if you can leave other areas long, maybe over winter, that's where your caterpillars will overwinter as well, and then they emerge the following year as beautiful butterflies.
Excellent. So all of these projects, we're always saying this, but these projects don't work without other people, without communities involved, without our fantastic volunteers. They do grassland survey with Shannon, they help with the restoration, they do all these things. We've actually acquired a new reserve at Penrith, which is a different kind of reserve for us. It's not going to be built upon. People seem to like that, with the urban sprawl that's kind of spreading out of Penrith. So we went to the people and we asked them what they wanted to see. And this project is now being headed up by the wonderful Amy. And Liz has been out at the opening of our new reserve in Penrith at Cold Springs.
I'm with Amy Stidoff, who is the Community Engagement Officer for the Cold Springs Nature Reserve outside Penrith. And Amy, that was an amazing band. Tell me what on earth's going on here today?
So we are reenacting the historic bottle shaking ceremonies of Penrith. So historically, there were 4 holy wells in Penrith, and each of them was celebrated on a Sunday in May. The idea was that you took your empty bottle and you and the band paraded up through the town, through the streets, where you added something sweet to your bottle, usually licorice, filled your bottle with water from the holy well and shook it. And then you got a sweet, frothy drink out of it. And you also were celebrating the water as well.
That's a significant event to be remembering. But tell me how that links to our new nature reserve here. Tell me a bit more about the nature reserve.
Yeah, so we're on Cold Springs Nature Reserve, which is a brand new nature reserve for Cumbria Wildlife Trust, and also our first community nature reserve. And we've chosen to reenact this historic bottle shaking ceremony as our opening event.
Okay, and the band was a procession towards the old well that's been renovated, wasn't it?
That was it, exactly, yeah. So lovely local band of local musicians and all the kids of the town of Penrith. And we paraded up through the nature reserve for the first time, filled our bottles from the holy well that is on the site.
This is a nature reserve that, it's not remote, it's not got a special species, it's not a wilderness. So why is it here?
Yeah, great question. We actually were very fortunate in that we had this land donated by Anne and Brian Clark a few years ago. They were going to leave it in their will, and Anne Clark decided to actually see it transformed in her lifetime. So yeah, it's quite an unusual reserve in that it's in an urban setting, so very, very close, surrounded on three sides by houses. And also it's not already really a very natural space. It's not full of biodiversity. So we've got the opportunity to really completely transform it from scratch, which is just absolutely incredible and exciting.
How big is it?
It's 15 hectares, so nearly 40 acres. So it's about a mile to walk all the way around it.
Yeah, somebody told me this morning it took them 20 minutes to go from one end to the other.
Yeah, it's a really nice chunk, and it runs along quite sort of a major road, and it has an absolutely stunning view over Penrith as well.
Yeah, I've seen the view. It's wonderful, isn't it?
Yeah, Lake District Hills in one direction and the Howgills in the other. So yeah, really special view.
And tell me too about how the community has got involved here.
So first of all, phenomenal. The community of Penrith are an absolute dream. I couldn't ask for better. So I mentioned that we've made this a community nature reserve. What I mean by that is everything is done for and by volunteers and people who live here. So it's not experts and ecologists coming in. It's like, what do people want to see? So for instance, right now we're standing in our wildlife garden, which is something that a lot of locals really, really wanted. We're right by a care home and a school, so hopefully a space they can use. That might not have been something we would automatically think to have put in a nature reserve, but it's because it's what people want to see. They want to make it happen, and it's the community who's built it.
So what sort of things have they been doing?
So we've planted over 2,000 trees on the site, miles and miles of fencing, benches, gates, which is much harder than it sounds. 5 ponds have been put in, this wildlife garden, 6,000 plug plants in the meadows. We've been pond dipping today as part of our opening event, and it's gorgeous to see how many things are in there. We got crazy amounts of water beetles and froglets and dragonfly larvae in there, and they've only been in for a year.
And that's how long it's been going on? Just a year?
Just a year, yeah. So we've had the land for a few years, but inevitably it takes a little while to get it going. So we've been working on it for about a year. 3 more years of work to go, we think, to get everything how we would like it to be.
What are your ambitions then over the next 3 years?
I would love for this space to just become somewhere that people feel like they have real ownership over, and they can use in whatever way they want to use it to connect with the outside. They might want to go out because they like walking, because they enjoy invertebrates, or because of the physical exercise, the mental health, the mindfulness. Like, this space should be for everyone to use the way they want to use it to get them to connect with nature. It's so good for us.
So how many folk do you think will end up using it?
I reckon at the moment about 50 people a day use it, which is phenomenal. And we've had maybe over 200, 250, I think, volunteers so far in the last year come up and help. So if that keeps growing, I've got 2 local schools and the local college involved regularly, local care home and dementia-friendly sessions happening, local wellbeing groups. So the more groups, the better. Come.
Well, I'm sure they will.
Yeah.
It seems to me that places like this are going to be a really, really important template going forward. As planning rules are relaxed and there's more development and there's more of imperative for nature to be incorporated into building developments. Mm-hmm. Is that something you've been aware of whilst you've been doing this?
Yes, I love that this space is here in an urban setting, and it's quite small relatively for a nature reserve. And it's being so well used, and the nature's moving in, and it just proves that not only do we need those green spaces, people want them, wildlife want them, they work, and there's no space too small. I would remember people's gardens. There's a brand new housing estate of 400 odd houses next to this site. Well, I view each of those gardens and it's an extension of the nature reserve. Yeah, as we lose those protections in planning, it is really important that we understand that we can do things with any amount of space.
Fantastic. Thanks, Amy.
Yeah, I'm John Richards, so I live on the new estate here. So it's great to be here, really. The sun's out, it's a very good turnout, And I think everybody that I've spoken to is certainly very interested in seeing what plans there are for the future with the reserve, and it's been explained to us, and it's lovely.
And what did you think when you heard that this area was being turned into a nature reserve?
Certainly, I think it's a great idea, and I know we're in a new build, but I mean, to have this looking underneath Beacon Edge and the forest, etc., I think it's just a fantastic idea that we've got the nature reserve here, and it's not going to be built on.
Okay, so is it a facility that you're going to be using quite a bit?
Well, since it's been open, I've been here every day. But yeah, I think it's just fantastic. But we're going to be up here a lot. We enjoy our walking, so we're going to be here, and I'm sure once people realise that it's all open within the estate and come out a bit more, and especially with the good weather that we've had recently, we'll all be out here and enjoying whatever it has to offer, which is a lot.
Fabulous, thank you. I've joined two of the volunteers who help at Cold Springs. It's Anne and Vanessa, and we were just talking about how it felt to them when they heard that this area had become a nature reserve and was in fact not going to be developed for building. Could you just tell me a bit about that again, and how you felt about that decision?
Well, there's such a lot of building going on around Penrith. I think we need to save as much of the land as we can for nature. So it was very encouraging to know that this was going to be turned into a reserve.
And Vanessa, you live around the corner.
Yes, that's right. And the fact that we have the nature reserve just behind the estate is fantastic. And so many people use it on a regular basis. So dog walkers, and there are a group of young, very adventurous boys who have great delight doing all sorts of exploring and cycle events all around the reserve, which is great.
Absolutely lovely. That's what a community reserve can do, I guess, isn't it? And I guess that's the difference, isn't it, between a nature reserve that's been dedicated for a special species and somewhere like this.
Yes, it is, and it's really important to make it accessible to everybody, and particularly when you live in a big estate when there's not that much open space, and what there is just tends to be grass, which is mown. You need to show people what's available. I mean, you only have to watch the swallows and house martins round the pond in the evening and hear the birds. It's fantastic.
And what have you two been doing personally on the reserve?
We've both planted some of the orchard trees last winter, and they're doing quite well. And I've been making some wooden information boards using a pyrography machine to say what different types of tree we've planted. So they're being installed at the moment. And I've also planted ferns and plug plants here as well at different times.
Vanessa?
So I've just been involved in the orchard planting because I've only recently moved onto the estates, but I hope to do more volunteering here and in other sites with the Trust as well.
So what kind of satisfaction have you had from taking part in something like this?
Well, there's so much bad news about nature and how it's being depleted. So anything that I can take part in that can reverse that just a little bit, I'm more than happy to help with.
And for me, tree planting is a huge deal. I really am passionate about increasing tree cover wherever we can. So yes, it's a really good thing to do.
Fantastic. Thanks very much for your time.
Okay. Thank you.
So my name's Cassie and I am a leader for Second Penrith Cubs, and I helped Beacon Cubs to produce the nature trail. We did a lot of work with Rich Scoffham, who helped us to produce the clues and helped us to get thinking really about what we could include in the nature trail for generations to come really.
And your lad Frankie is here too.
Yep.
Hello Frankie.
Hi.
And have you done the nature trail, Frankie?
Yeah, I have, and it's really fun, and it's really good for like the people who are like kids, and it's really good for like adventures and all of that. And my name's Frankie.
Thank you, Frankie. So you did the nature trail. So what sort of things did you manage to see?
The butterfly, those frogs, and there's a bird, and there's really good for like people who are like good at like adventures.
You like adventures.
Mhm.
Okay, and do you live in Penrith?
We do, don't we? Yeah. I've lived in Penrith all my life, so's Frankie.
So do you think this is going to be a really useful addition in Penrith?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, us as a cub group, we're going to use this frequently for such things as wide games, getting out here and looking about what animals and things are around. We can use this for, doing kelly kettles and things like that with our cubs. It's going to be a really useful space for us in particular, and definitely for the community to get kids out away from the screens and into nature. Yeah, it's going to be really useful. Penrith's growing all the time. It's twice the size it was when I was young. I'm officially of an age where I can say I used to play in these fields, all this used to be fields. So it's really nice that this part, particularly for me, that this is still going to maintain my memories really from when I was a child.
Frankie, is there anything else you want to tell me? What was it? Did you come here with cubs?
Yeah, and there was like 2 nights where we went to go and visit the well, and we did some den building and there, and there's really good stuff to do.
Yeah. And today there was the band and the procession and the bottle shaking ceremony. Did you take part in that?
Yes, I did. When we were going into the well, I was like doing like an instrument and all that.
You're playing an instrument?
Yeah.
Oh, fantastic. And did you get a bottle? Did you get some sweeties in it?
Yes.
Did it taste all right?
Yes. It didn't taste all right at the end, it did taste nice at the start.
Okay, but it wore off. The taste wore off. Okay, thanks very much, Frankie.
You're welcome.
Okay.
What a fantastic project. Getting the local community involved, getting everybody else's ideas, and then the community uses that space.
Absolutely fantastic. I've been there, and children, it's their playground. They're loving it. They're loving that first-hand connection with nature on their doorsteps, right there in the heart of Penrith.
Yeah, superb. Hey, we'll bring it to a close this time anyway. It is National Meadows Week, isn't it? So people ought to get out and have a look at those species-rich grasslands while all those flowers are up.
Absolutely. It's the best time of the year to go and see them. So get out there, get a packed lunch with you, and get a wildflower book if you can do, and go and enjoy them.
Yeah, and if you do look on our website, like as well as Bowber Head, we've got the beautiful meadows that were restored at Icot Hill. We've got other grasslands, especially within this eastern Cumbrian area, at Argyll, at Orgill, at Smardale, and at Tarnside. So have a look through the reserve guide, have a look on the website, get out there and go and see some wonderful blooms before it all gets cut. Thank you, Tanya, for coming and explaining all things grassland and pollinators. That's been absolutely brilliant. Thanks again to Liz for doing all the hard work on the ground and getting the interviews in. Thanks to Shannon and to Amy for their wonderful interviews and explaining what they do. And like I said, we're in the middle of summer. Get out there and see some of these flowers.